Thanks for the opportunity to converse again. Peter Miller, psychologist. And I'm not sure because I don't understand the difference between various kinds of psychologists. Are you a clinical psychologist? And what does that mean? And if you're not, what does that mean?
I call myself a clinical psychologist because I work in a clinic and
Okay.
I meet with people every day, most days. So
And
that's how I use the word. Yeah.
is it one-on-one or do you do group things too?
Almost entirely one-on-one.
Okay. Mhm.
Sometimes people bring in their partners to just to like learn a little bit more about how to work with them. So yeah, we have had groups at our clinic before, like skill building groups and therapy groups, but yeah, and I've been part of those, but I've never actually facilitated one. I
Mhm.
mostly just do one-on-one therapy with adults.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah.
How long have you been doing that? Decades?
Yeah, I was just talking to my family about it recently. So I was like, I've been studying psychology for 17 years, and I've been practicing officially in my job for 10. And I was like, I still don't know enough. Like, like I'm still learning. Like there's so many facets to it, and there's so many ways that you can learn and grow. And it's like I'm still like learning new things like every day. And
Well, I think,
it's very humbling
well,
occupation.
I was going to say, I think that's the mark of a humble, intelligent human being. You know, my last days at the University of Arizona, I was learning. I didn't feel like I knew things. I would start every class that I taught with, this is a conversation. We are working on this together. We're the core of discovery, like Lewis and Clark. And the core of discovery, it's not just Lewis and Clark, it's all of us who can contribute to this conversation.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah, I
I
like
think that,
and I see myself in my patients all the time. It's like, it's like I got what you got. Like, I got that issue too. I'm still working on it.
and do you tell them?
Not usually, but I don't know. Sometimes people can kind of read me and they're like, I can see that you're not feeling perfect today, Peter, like I don't know. But
And do you not tell people, is that part of the enterprise of psychology, is that as the therapist, you don't want to what admit your weakness, or maybe that's too strong a phrase.
well, if you get into too much self-disclosure, then it kind of becomes about you instead of them.
Oh, this is why, see, I've gone to counselors and therapists 4 or 5 times, and I only go until I feel like I can't help them any further.
Nice.
So yes, I know what you're talking about, because it doesn't take long every time I've done it anyway for the conversation to devolve into the mess that is their life.
Yeah. Yeah. A therapist should be conscious about those boundaries. Yeah, I think
I,
for sure.
I don't think I was going to good therapists.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I say little bits, but then I turn the tables and say, it's you're here to work on you, and it's not about me. I have
Right,
my own issues, and I work on them in my own time.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think we all have issues. Anybody who thinks they don't have issues really has issues.
I would agree with that. Well,
But
I'd agree with that. We all have issues.
my,
Every single one of us, if we've been born and raised in the system of the industrial system,
yes,
then I don't know if you can escape it without some pathology.
I can't
I,
imagine. Students would come to me on a pretty regular basis, and they wanted me to be their therapist. And so it didn't take long before I figured out we can't have this conversation. And I would recommend that they go to the therapy group that was on campus. And I wouldn't just recommend it, I would walk over with them, because I heard from far too many of them early on that if their friends found out they were getting counseling or doing therapy, then that's some sort of black mark, right, on that relationship,
yeah,
because we are unwilling to admit that we have psychological problems in this culture. And so I would
yeah,
walk over with them and get the appointment made, or have them go in and see somebody.
mm,
And I would tell them on the way over, we all got problems. Everybody's a mess. Some of us are willing to admit it.
Hmm.
And that's how you get better, not by staying in the same spot.
Hmm. Yeah, there's lots of fear of, having that stigma. Absolutely. I think people equate mental health or mental illness with weakness, or they
No,
even equate talking about emotions to weakness.
of course.
So, it's like it can rob you of your masculinity or something, or it can, whatever, otherwise rob you of your reputation as a strong human kind
I
of thing.
can't tell you how many thousand times as a kid I heard big boys don't cry,
Mm-hmm.
right? Big boys don't expose their emotional state. I don't know if you have that.
Sadly, I think that's still quite prevalent. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Hmm.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. It's I've always had less male clients than female clients in all my work. They don't access therapy as much,
right,
and if they do, they don't stay as long.
right, because big boys don't cry.
I don't know. I mean, I don't always get the reasons. I mean, I can make assumptions, but I mean, I think it lots of times it has to do with work, and they put that as a higher priority, right? So like work is always more important than their health.
Absolutely. We are our work. That's what the society tells us. Anytime I go to any sort of social gathering, I go to a party or I go to a dinner or whatever, the first question out of somebody's mouth who's just met me, what do you do? And by that, they mean, what work do you do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, our identities are completely wrapped up in the work we get paid for. And, now that I don't get paid anymore, I think that's a terrible thing. I didn't really think about it before.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. We do identify with our work and it's pretty powerful. Pardon me.
It's amazing. I mean, if
Hmm.
you'd wanted to build a culture in which the working class identified themselves according to the work they do, I don't think you could have done any better than what we've done here.
Hmm.
Our entire identity is wrapped up in that stuff.
Yeah. I remember when that started happening and with my friends, like we used to like hang out and go skateboarding together. And like, I guess we didn't really have adult identities yet, of course, right? And then when we started after high school, it's like, okay, you're a real estate agent and you're a doctor and like and you're a construction person and that's what you are, and or you're whatever, you're a therapist. And then if we wanted to hang out, it's like it had to do something with work. Like we couldn't just hang out. Like it's like, okay, you're gonna come to my program, or are you gonna like buy my product? Like that's how it's just sort of sad to me. Like we can't just be buddies anymore.
Right, right. And some of those boxes are better than others. That's the implication.
Hmm. Hmm.
Are you an important box, or are you a little lowly box that I don't want to have anything to do with?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's like you get this value stamped on you.
Right.
Hmm.
Wow.
I guess that's part of living in the rocking in the free world in the industrial, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Music from my youth.
Hey,
You know the music from my youth.
I think so. Yeah, probably.
Rocking in the free world.
Yeah, Neil Young. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that song. Yeah, yeah. And I'm trying to promote my favorite band lately, Ghost, as you can see.
I don't know Ghost.
No,
Apparently,
yeah, they're from
apparently,
Sweden. They're kind of a dark band from Sweden, and they've been emerging for the last 5 or 6 years. So check them
apparently,
out.
apparently, this band is not visible to me. I'm writing it down right now. What else you got?
um, so yeah, I read the article that you sent me, and I mean, I was not. I mean, nothing was really there that I hadn't heard before from times past that we spoke. I was thinking that today our conversation was going to go into that, you know, the pros and cons of having a hope or hope-free mentality.
Right.
And some of how that word is tossed around, and maybe
Right.
even how that word could be, if we're not careful, it could have some hazards potentially.
Right. So now, more than 2 years after this article was written, now I recognize the difference between various kinds of hope. For example, I hope it's a nice day tomorrow. I hope it doesn't rain today because we have friends coming over and we want a barbecue. And this is making a statement over which I admit I have no control. It's like hope is appealing to the universe to be nice to me today, right? And that's different than the kind of hope I was writing about in the article Becoming Hope Free. In that the definition of hope, when you look it up in the dictionary, it's basically wishing. The dictionary doesn't differentiate between wishing for a certain future that's better than this one and hope. That's what hope is wishing for a certain future. And we do have some control over our future. And so this is not like, I hope it doesn't rain today, because I don't have any control over that. But I do have control over, I hope I don't end up a homeless person in Los Angeles, right? So that's the differentiation I'm trying to make, that we do have control, and exerting that control is important in our lives. All those students that I would take over to the therapy facility on campus, they hope that nobody would see them walking over there, right? Because of two reasons: they were going to get therapy, and two, they were walking with a professor, and no good can come of that. You must be in some sort of trouble. Like walking in the hall with the principal.
Yeah.
But that's not real hope. That's just wishing that doesn't happen. They were hoping, if they stuck with it, if they went to the therapist and went more than one time and took to heart the words of the therapist, then their hoping for a different future is perfectly reasonable. But that kind of hope takes action on the part of on the individual doing the hoping.
Yeah, I mean, for sure there can be imaginary hope, false hope, and I think more realistic hope, depending on what you're trying to achieve or what you're doing, like, or whatever the subject is, right? I guess some of my concern, like, I remember when you wrote that article, hope is a lie, right? Or
Yes.
no, a mistake and a lie, right? Yeah.
Yes. Right.
And it was, of course, in reference to environmental circumstances, right? And how you forecast things happening,
right?
Basically. So I guess my concern as a therapist and stuff, and even some of the ways I've processed this information is like, if I'm not having a very good day, or if I'm stuck in some of my own mental health struggles, like I could kind of like take from what I learned from Nature Bats Last, and I'd be like, yeah, like life is like, there's no point, like I could use that information in that way to bring myself down further, right? If I was struggling.
Well, it's interesting because I do occasionally hear that sort of sentiment. Somebody wrote to me recently and said, if we're in the midst of a mass extinction event and we're all going to die, then why shouldn't I just slit my own throat? And I'm like, really? You've known since you were 12 years old, probably before, that you were going to die. And all these years later, you haven't slit your own throat. I think that would be pretty challenging anyway, to slit your own throat,
Mhm,
personally.
mhm.
So for me, and for a lot of people, if they can be believed anyway, a lot of people have told me that my message encourages them to live with urgency. And that's what it does for me. Our lives are short, really, no matter how you look at it. Our lives are short. And so I encourage people to keep their death in mind, not to hope, but to take action toward getting the things done that they want to get done. Take action on completing relationships that are currently incomplete. And so I frequently recommend the Grief Recovery Handbook, which had a very strong positive influence over me. That and taking the grief recovery workshop several years ago pointed out to me that grief itself, is wishing for a different past. You don't have any control over the past. I don't have any control over the past. I had this tortured relationship with my immediate family, as I've already indicated, because they bought into the defamation campaign, accusing me of terrible things. And because of that altered nature of our relationship, which I failed to recognize until I completed the grief recovery workshop, I was a mess. I thought that I had the same relationship with my family members as I always had. I was wishing for a different past. I was wishing for the past that we had when we all got along and we were good friends as well as family. And that all changed. And once I recognized that, I was able to complete a few very simple exercises that changed my way of thinking and my way of acting towards those individuals. So that's been very important for me. And in this article that we talked about just a little bit in Clinical Psychology Forum, I draw the parallel between wishing for a different past and wishing for a certain future. The former being grief, the latter being hope. The kind of hope I was writing about back then, more than 2 years ago, more than 3 years ago. Whew, it just slips away.
Yeah. Um, so I guess you can see too that information can be used in a variety of ways, right? Like depending on who's receiving it. Like if they're more vulnerable, they could kind of use the information irrationally to end their life sooner than necessary.
Of course.
Yeah,
It,
and I
it,
guess that's the ethical aspect that I wanted to explore a little bit more. And it's kind of like with any message or product that's out there. It's kind of like I think there should be more informed consent, like with like even with like social media, like Facebook should have a warning label like that says this is an addictive product and it is and it's designed to try and keep you engaged.
Mhm.
And it's it's in that way it's it can rob you of other opportunities to experience your life, and it can deteriorate your relationships. Like, I mean, there should be a warning label on all social media. Like
Yes.
I mean, if you watch the documentary The Social Dilemma, and I read a great book by Jason Lanier called 10 Reasons to Delete Your Facebook Account or Social Media Accounts. And I mean, it's just point blank, like they do it on purpose, like to try and get you hooked.
Right. And I've seen several indications of that. People who used to work for Twitter, Facebook, or whatever came out and said, listen, these things are not healthy. I don't even allow my kids to have a Facebook account or a Twitter account. That's what they say. They say it's toxic. Don't go there. I think that's what the label should say. When you log into your Facebook account, it should say your account is being deactivated unless you press here within the next 3 seconds. Sorry, you're too late.
Mhm. Mhm.
because they are very toxic. And with a lot of the social media, things like YouTube come to mind, it's anonymous. You not only have never met that person, but you don't even know their name.
Mhm.
They could be living right next to you, door to you, or they might not live in your country. You don't even know these people. And they're saying
Mhm.
things that have influence over our lives, right? People call us
Mhm.
horrible things on social media and we take it seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very potentially toxic, and I mean, and yeah, to individuals and communities and just like the political polls, right? Like, I think when that situation happened in Canada recently about with all the convoys and about the masking and injections and stuff, like that was really hyperinflated and amplified by social media, and people probably their behavior was changed by that, right? To be more extreme,
Of
more
course, of
and
course.
maybe more violent.
And I think the corporate media, I don't know if that's the agenda, but it certainly seems to be the outcome very frequently. The divisions that they create are enormous. So we can start with a decent relationship with somebody. We've only known them for a short period of time, say we're all getting along just fine, like your friends, your skate buddies. And then we start getting influenced by things that are said in the world. And wait, you're not only not skateboarding anymore, but you're robbing grocery stores or whatever, right? And that causes this divergence among people who used to get along, or in some cases don't even know each other.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel
And
really sad for the young kids these days who are kind of growing up with this way of like this way of learning about like how to be human, because it's not a human way of it's not learning how to be human, if you ask me. And yeah, there's going to be more and more um, emotional immaturity and other mental health issues related to that as it just continues.
it's
Um,
horrible.
yeah.
So I can't even imagine being a 15-year-old today. It was hard enough when we were 15 years old, and we're just growing into ourselves and going through puberty and all that and trying to figure out our relationship with the world and the people in the world. And now you got social media to go along with it. And you got these people you never met accusing you of terrible things because of something you said 4 years ago on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean the list is long of things about how social media can be toxic, probably, right? Um, I was going to ask you though, like, and I think I mentioned this in an email, and I hope you're okay with me just asking this kind of question, being curious, like, should nature bats last also come with kind of an informed consent before people dive into it?
It's an interesting question. I've never considered it because I focus so heavily on presenting the evidence uncovered by other people, which is the entirety of Nature Bats Last, basically, is to mine information from peer-reviewed articles to put out initially a lot of essays, and over the last couple of years, more videos. The reason for that is that I can make a small amount of money by monetizing the videos, whereas my written work, essentially nobody reads, and there's no way to make a living at it. So should it come with a warning label? I don't know. Should there be an entry point that says the topics? So when you first try to go to guymcpherson.com, you get this little warning that says the topics covered in Nature Bats Last are for adults only or whatever. That's I don't know how to do that, but I can talk to some people who do IT work and
Well, I was
ask.
just thinking like it's not that it always will with every person who accesses it, because like some people have let's just say, like, right, some people have more mental health challenges than others. Some people are more vulnerable and predisposed, but they're still curious about what's happening with the planet. Um, but like the information could kind of find its way into some of their negative thinking patterns, and it could potentially add extra emotional load, right? It, I'm just kind of, yeah, I'm hoping to add to the ethics of it that way. I can't say, of course, like that learning about, how things are decaying and how things are falling apart is going to, like, there's obviously no scientific studies yet or any proof that that can make a person kind of like go over the edge of depression and into like suicide. But I don't know. I think it's fair to say that it possibly could with some people. That's all. That's all.
That's fair enough.
And that if you're going to explore this stuff and you are vulnerable, then do it, like, make sure you're working with a therapist at the same time, or right, like someone to have some sort of support system that where you can, if you're feeling really heavy emotions, that you can find, you don't sink, right?
Right. There are some campuses now, some colleges and universities, that the instructor has to issue a trigger warning before he talks about certain subjects, and the students are free to leave. They don't have to hear that, and as a consequence, you can't put that information on the exam. Now, I don't know who makes those decisions, right? So a professor once talked about the difference between smoking and drinking in class. That certainly could trigger emotions from some 19-year-olds. Of course it could, but I'm not sure where we draw the line. Because anything, almost anything, can trigger some sort of negative emotional response from somebody, depending upon their own personal history.
Yes, there can be many things that are part of that. I guess I just think the like the package that you present, I think it's a higher on that level, I guess, personally.
That doesn't surprise me at all. I present peer-reviewed evidence that the corporate media won't talk about. The IPCC, one of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, one of the most conservative scientific bodies in the history of the planet, has admitted with 2 separate reports that climate change is abrupt and irreversible. And they did that in 2018 and 2019. October 2018, September 2019, with 2 separate reports, they admitted that climate change was abrupt and irreversible. And it made the news for 10 seconds or so. That information should be as common as Bud Light commercials on television, right? This is really important information. We know no way to reverse climate change, as admitted by the IPCC. It is more abrupt than biosphere forces that have altered Earth systems in the past. Incredibly abrupt. And we're not sharing that information every day. I think that's critically important. And I also think that it's potentially dangerous, because if people know that climate change is abrupt and irreversible, a couple of things happen. Some people will lose agency. They will lose their sense of being. Oh, so what that means is human animals are going to lose habitat on this planet. Perhaps most importantly, nonprofit organizations like, well, I won't name names, the environmentally oriented nonprofit organizations will suddenly lose much of their reason for being. If you're hitting people up for money because you want to make climate change reversible, and the populace knows that climate change is irreversible, then that's going to be problematic. for the Sierra Club or Greenpeace or whoever, right? If suddenly they're not able to make enough money to keep themselves going anymore.
Mhm.
I'm not suggesting that that's why they have not admitted the full truth, because they probably don't know. Because the information about the abrupt, irreversible state of climate change, you never hear about that. It's not in the news ever. You know, each of those reports was in the news for a few hours, or maybe even a few days,
Mhm.
years ago. But I'd be willing to bet there are several thousand Bud Light commercials that have run since each of those was in the news.
And maybe it's a lot to do with because those messages don't make much money, right? Like they
Oh,
just don't.
absolutely.
And so why would they,
Nobody
include
wants
them
to
very
read
much?
that. Nobody wants
Yeah.
to read that.
Yeah.
I understand that. And yet I also have this strong sense that even though people don't want to know, they deserve to know. People don't want to know that cigarette smoking causes cancer, but it does.
And
And
it took years for that to
it took
come out.
decades. It took decades before the tobacco companies had to get into that line because of the power they held at the time. And I suspect the power that is held by nonprofit environmental organizations is quite similar today.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah, I was imagining this conversation for like days before it happened. I was like doing my meditation. I'm like, wow, Peter, you're sure thinking about talking to Guy a lot. And
And yet you still did.
well, I was almost going to pull the plug. Yeah,
Mhm.
my thoughts kind of went in a bit of a paranoid way, and I thought, wow, is my mind body telling me the truth? Is something bad going to happen? And then yeah, luckily I worked through that.
My whole point is that something bad is going to happen.
Well, I meant like you were going to hurt me or something
Oh,
like.
oh,
Yeah.
no, absolutely not. You're one of the most decent people I've ever talked to on air like this. You didn't start right away by calling me names. That's quite a pleasant surprise.
Well, I got my issues too. That's for sure. Um,
And I think that's an important point. You got your issues. I have my issues. We all have our issues.
mhm,
Everybody does. Let's try to work through them in a positive manner.
mhm, mhm.
Knowing what's going on in the world is terrible.
Well, what really first attracted me to your work was somehow I came across Going Dark, and I was like, fuck, this guy really like tells the truth. Like that was my thing, right? Like I thought, I love that. Like when it seems like someone's telling the truth, no matter how ugly, right? And I was like, that's so cool. And that's why I wanted to meet you in the first place, right?
And then the truth settled in. And it wasn't so much fun anymore, right?
It was hard to bear. Yeah, well,
Absolutely.
and I mean, I've been working on myself and trying to become. I'm always trying to, I guess, become a better me. And that word truth is like it's a curious word, like I remember I was in a sociology class in college and I was like, I can't remember what we were talking about, but I was like, I want to know the truth about this issue, right? And my professor's like, well, then you should go climb on a ledge and open a window and climb on a ledge. And I was like, wow.
What?
Well, he was kind of like saying you might as well just go kill yourself, like because I think that's what he was saying because
Right.
because
Because it's not that
I
simple.
think he was saying like there is no truth, or the truth is kind of complicated, more complicated than you think, kind of thing. Um, and it seems like lots of people want to have the corner on truth, like like when
Right.
you think about like even like any group, like it's like they think they got it figured out, right? Any religion figures they got it figured out, and they got the corner on truth,
Right.
and they know exactly what to do and for how you to live your life, and how to think so that you'll have the best outcome, right?
And this is why I try to focus more on evidence, just in my language. I try to indicate that I'm providing evidence. I'm not providing truth, because truth means something different for almost every person on the planet. There are a lot of people who think that truth is plural, that your truth is different from my truth, because of the way of thinking that they have. And I encourage those people to look in a dictionary, and then they don't talk to me anymore. So that's the end of my positive influence over those kind of people. So I try to focus on evidence instead of words that trigger a negative reaction, like truth. Because, like hope, most people don't really know what it means. They haven't looked it up in their entire lives, so they capitulate to what society assumes or states or something, so that almost everybody has this notion of truth as being godlike. At least a lot of people do. It falls into the same category as omnipotence. And when I say truth, I'm thinking about evidence. I'm thinking about this sentence or this statement being true, not whether the universe is 13.8 billion years old or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's tough. There's a bunch of things that this society loads onto us that make it difficult for us to proceed positively with our lives. Just tracking down evidence in the face of corporate media and politicians is tough enough.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Working within the system as it is a huge challenge. Like I basically think pretty much, well, a large portion of us are set up for failure
mm-hmm.
because we don't learn what we need to learn to function in our adult bodies, right? So we don't know how to deal with our feelings. We don't know how to be in relationships. We don't know if we have patterns of personality disorder going on. Like, we're just oblivious, right? So yeah, we don't live in I don't think we live in a truthful world, really.
Absolutely not. Are you familiar with Howard Gardner?
No.
Howard Gardner is, or was, a renowned educator. He was at Harvard as a professor, and he wrote about first the 7 and then the 8 and then the 10 kinds of intelligence. And he pointed out that in the public school system in the United States, we focus on 2: mathematical logical, which is 1, and linguistic intelligence. And in the United States, that linguistic intelligence focuses only on the English language, not any others. And among the many other kinds of intelligence he identifies are intrapersonal and interpersonal. Intrapersonal means the ability to meditate, think about your place in the world by yourself. You would never get away with that, with teaching that in a public school in the United States. Thinking about your place in the universe, shut up and get a job. That's the response, right? And interpersonal is, those are the people who are very charismatic, who can, they make great car salesmen, and they're good at a lot of other things too, but nobody even knows. Among the others are kinesthetic. Michael Jordan had great kinesthetic intelligence, but he wasn't so great at other things. He was superior to almost everybody on Earth with his kinesthetic intelligence. And let's see, what else? Intrapersonal and interpersonal are among the 2 that are basically never mentioned in public schools. There's musical intelligence. We can all get better at playing music, but if we don't have something that is born into us, or we're unwilling to spend thousands of hours, we're just not going to be, it's not going to be our profession ever. Bach was born with a certain kind of musical talent that he improved on throughout his relatively short life. So there are these different kinds of intelligence, as pointed out by Howard Gardner, and we don't focus on any except two. And arguably the others are equally or more important than those two we focus on. Another one he identified as spiritual intelligence, the ability to connect with the universe or some part of the universe in some way. And I think that there's potential for overlap here with intrapersonal intelligence and that spiritual intelligence, but whatever. In any event, he was thinking about and writing about things that are largely taboo in this society. So that's amazing all by itself.
Yeah, the people who write about the taboo stuff. I mean, I like that. So I mean, the work that you've done, I guess another one of my challenges, I guess, in the psychology realm was there is a fair amount of inference in your work, right? Like inferring what's going to happen next, right?
Yes, and that comes from my background as a conservation biologist. Almost all climate scientists, and I'm not one, just to be clear, I'm a conservation biologist, I'm not a climate scientist. Almost all climate scientists have degrees in engineering, physics, astronomy. And so the lack of knowledge about natural systems, about ecology and biology is quite telling. When you don't understand what words such as habitat and extinction mean, and speciation, those are the three pillars of conservation biology. Speciation, when a new species forms as a result of the genetics new to the species. Extinction, when the last individual of a species disappears. And habitat, those are the big three. And climate scientists don't seem to know a lot about those things. And so that hampers the ability of the typical climate scientist to conjecture, to write about, to think about things like the exponential function and even the notion of habitat. And I think that plays into our earlier conversation about habitat. Almost nobody knows what that is. Nobody knows what that means, especially people growing up in the modern world, like you and me, right? We grow up in a house, we grow up in a city or in a suburb, and we go to the grocery store to get our food, and we go to the gym to work out, and there's no hunting and gathering anymore. And our relationships are profoundly influenced by the work we do, which is dictated by society. I hate to use the word crazy when I'm having a conversation with you, but it seems like that's where we are.
I'm like, it's not in the DSM whenever people tell me that. That word it's not a diagnosis.
Well, a lot of people have diagnosed me with that, so I'm glad to hear it's not in the DSM.
Yeah, it's not a real diagnosis. So, and I guess we're talking about potential thought patterns here with that can come from studying your work. So I guess another one, I guess, that I would want people to watch out for, just understanding the psychological stuff, is just because you're making inferences doesn't mean that they have to jump to conclusions about how this is all going to happen, when it's all going to happen, how much pain they're going to experience. Because I mean, a lot of people they have that what if, right? What if mentality, yes. And they jump into the future, and there's so much anxiety associated with that, and catastrophizing, right? Like those are some of the irrational patterns that are so common. But I mean, so just because someone's studying your work doesn't mean that they have to fall into those traps, right?
No, absolutely. I'm asked every day, and I've pointed this out many times on the blog and more recently with videos. I'm asked every day, how am I going to die? Somebody actually asked me that question almost every day. And then the follow-up, as if it's an afterthought, is how are we all going to die? And I point out that there's a variety of consequences of losing habitat for our species, but I don't know about you as an individual. I point out Homer's work in the Iliad, any moment might be our last. And so living with urgency, I don't think is a bad idea, but I'm not predicting that the next moment is going to be your last. And so I'm constantly walking that line, encouraging people to pursue the evidence and live with urgency, but not buy into the notion that people accuse me of all the time that I predict extinction by next Tuesday. I don't know what it is about Tuesday, but in this household, it has become known as Apocalypse Tuesday, every Tuesday, because that's such a common misinterpretation of my work, that we're all going to die next Tuesday.
Yeah. So I mean, like, if people are getting stuck in those kinds of patterns, I mean, and they may have already been getting stuck in those before learning about anything that you share, right? Like, you can get stuck in that for lots of ways and reasons. But I guess just to remain conscious of that you're not really living in reality. You're not really living in a healthy way if when your mind is constantly going ahead like that. And I guess someone could accuse you of, like, you're trying to make people catastrophize, right? You want them to live in fear. Like, someone could accuse you of that if they wanted to.
I get that all the time. In fact, another professor, a Dutch professor, who has interviewed me several times, just within the last couple of days, she has released a video titled, "Is Guy McPherson something fear, promoting fear or causing fear," or something like that. And she goes through in her relatively short video and answers negatively, but the comments aren't so sure. The anonymous comments on YouTube, some of those people have concluded that that's my whole goal, is to promulgate fear.
Yeah. So it's like you're trying to hurt people, right? You're trying to get them existentially stressed, kind of thing.
Right. And that's not at all what I have ever been doing. In fact, the essay on the blog called "Contemplating Suicide," in the first sentence or two, as I recall, it has a disclaimer like, I'm not saying go there. I'm not saying to commit suicide. I don't even know you if you're reading this. And then I tell the story of the individual who decided to commit suicide very thoughtfully on his 60th birthday. I thought about that a lot on my 60th birthday, that this is the day he chose. And he did it very thoughtfully, very carefully, communicated very well what was going on in his life. And, I'm in no position to tell people what to do. And that includes whether to commit suicide or not. Although if I ever come across somebody attempting to commit suicide, I strongly suspect I will try to discourage them. I'm not the kind of guy who sees somebody in the ditch who's miserable and says, "Please kill me," and I hand them a gun. Right? I don't have a gun, for one thing. People in the United States are unfamiliar with that sentiment. You in Canada know what it's like to not have a gun.
I've never had a gun in my whole life, and I've never had a reason to need one either. So I don't get it. But anyway, that's another subject. Eh? Well, I guess it is along the lines of living in fear, but
right, and it's easy to live in fear in the United States because the media promulgates fear, and the entire culture is all about fear. How do you think about how the United States got into World War II? Fear. That's how we get into every so-called police action, because we don't do wars anymore, because wars require approval from Congress. So now we just do police actions, and it's all based on fear. The terrorists are coming to get us. We must invade Iraq, Iran, China, pick a country, because the terrorists are coming to get us. It's all about fear.
Keeps the economy going, right?
Absolutely. Makes a few people even richer.
Yeah. I had this other thought, or this other area that I thought might be interesting. And it's one that comes up in therapy quite a bit, is being willing to live with uncertainty, and like that you don't know how things are going to happen.
Mhm.
And people try and come up with ways to numb that, or to get to have some distance from that feeling, right? So they want to feel in control, even though I think it's pretty much an illusion that we do to ourselves.
Everybody I know wants to know what day and what hour they're going to die.
Yeah. So people don't like that feeling, uncertainty.
Right.
Um, and I guess another thing I was wondering was, could people use nature bats last and that message as a way of going like, I know I have some certainty now because I know it's all going to go to shit. I know it's all falling apart in the next 10 years. So like I don't have to be uncertain anymore.
I'm sure people do that. I'm absolutely convinced that people do that. But I really strongly encourage in writing and with my spoken word for people to maintain their ethical standards. You know, just because there will be no habitat for humans next Tuesday does not mean that we should all go to the bank and rob it and go to the grocery store and steal all the Bud Light. Right? That's not what I'm promoting at all. I'm promoting living with decency, with integrity, so that no matter how long you have, you can look back on your life and say, you know, I did some things wrong and I regret not doing this or that or the other thing, but at least I didn't kill those 37 people so I could get Bud Light at Walgreens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I really try to focus on that a lot. I don't know if it comes across because so many people cherry pick my work and edit out what they want to hear. I don't know.
Because people call your work, sometimes they like, and I've thought of it too, as like, it's the truth, he's telling the truth.
And this again is why
But I don't know,
I
I
try to
don't know
use
if
the
it's,
word. This is why I try to use the word evidence, because you know, among the most conservative peer-reviewed journals in the world is the annual review series. It comes out once a year, the annual review of Earth and Planetary Sciences, for example. So the annual review of Earth and Planetary Sciences published this paper in 2012, projecting an ice-free Arctic Ocean in 2016, plus or minus 3 years. And later, I talked with the senior author, the lead author of that paper. He's a professor at the United States Naval Postgraduate School. And he said that the last data point they had for Arctic sea ice was from 2007. That's another indication of how conservative this journal is. It took 5 years from the last data point being collected in September of 2007 until the thing was published in, I think, February of 2012. And he pointed out, correctly so, that they had a relatively small data set because satellite records only go back to 1979. And the last data point was down here, was very low. The last data point was 2007. And so instead of projecting like this, because that low point in Arctic sea ice dragged the projection down like this. So it hit out here at 2016 plus or minus 3 years. Well, here we are. It's not 2016 or 2017 or 2018 or 2019, which is the plus 3 years. It's not even 2020 or 2021 or 20. It is 2022, but the same group at the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School has come up with a 6-month ensemble forecast. 6 months in advance, they're predicting, based on more data, and they're not projecting. So they're not just using a linear projection based on the data points so far. And they indicate that there's at least a 95% chance that we will not have an ice-free Arctic this year.
I mean, like those contradictions in evidence, they kind of seem to suggest that like the scientific evidence is not necessarily truth.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that's, again, why I focus on saying the word evidence and pointing out that sometimes people have been wrong before, or that the approach they used was incorrect. So, yes. And I frequently in the videos I produce, I point out that I might be wrong. I might be wrong because I rely upon these other papers, these peer-reviewed papers, and sometimes they're wrong. And I point to the paper by Maslovsky and colleagues in the annual review of Earth and Planetary Sciences.
So we have to say evidence is not necessarily truth. Like that, people need to understand that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, and sadly, I think that does need to be said. You know, that, as you well know, being a reasonably educated person yourself, the populace is not reasonably educated, and particularly when it comes to scientific language. At least in the United States, that's pretty much the last agenda item in the public school system, is educating people about what science is and how it works. A lot of people know the products of science, the technology. You know, everybody's walking around with a smartphone, and they think that's science, when in fact it's technology. Anyway, yes, so people who are interested in educating the populace about science, you know, following the lead of Carl Sagan, for example, are facing this pretty challenging uphill battle in which the system is designed so that people not only don't know how science works, but are afraid of the scientific process itself, or dismissive of it. That, you know, I've heard thousands of times, it's just like religion, it's just like art, it's just like one thing or another. Science is just one of those ways of understanding it. No, it's not like those. In fact, it puts itself up, every scientific finding puts itself up to being wrong, posts this information so that it can be proven wrong.
It's best guess at the time, right? Basically.
Yes, in a way, absolutely. And that's why it's important to understand evidence and how it is accumulated. I mean, here we are. We're going to get through, almost certainly we're going to get through 3 more years after the 2016 plus or minus 3 years. They did not write 2016 plus or minus 7 years. And that's pretty much what we're guaranteed at this point.
Yeah.
Which
so, I mean, if a person finds himself hearing a paper like that, like someone talking about a paper like that, they got to go, okay, it's not truth, it's best guess. Like you have to, if you're going to float in these waters and study extinction, you kind of have to, you have to learn how to think about it, right?
Right. And that's where I think one of the ways that the society has gone off the rails is that people don't understand what science is as a way of knowing, as a way of understanding the universe and what that involves, how we get from point A to point B. How did we figure out calculus in the first place? How did we know that gravity works on this planet pretty much all the time?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are some things that are known with great certainty at this point, and other things that aren't. How do we tell the difference? And those are topics that, as nearly as I can tell, are rarely or never discussed in the public school system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wish that there could be more interviews with you and other people that are really strong in that field, that have opposing views, so that you could, we could have a closer approximation of the truth.
Right. Me too.
It's hard to make that happen, though, isn't it?
Yes, it is. For years, people have been telling me, you've got to debate Noam Chomsky. because Noam is smarter than anybody else on the planet. And what he says is different than what you say. And so finally, this group of Marxists in South America contacted me and asked if I'd be willing to do an online debate of sorts, more like an online conversation with Noam Chomsky. Interestingly, who is at my old institution. He works at the University of Arizona now.
Mm.
And so we went back and forth, and various, it's been published already in various languages, Russian most recently, and Spanish, German, probably one or two others. The English version is due out within the next couple of weeks, apparently. So that's great. That's great that Noam Chomsky finally said, yes, I will have this conversation, this online debate with Guy McPherson, because Noam Chomsky knows a lot about everything, including climate change. And so it's nice we could have that conversation, as limited as we are by the consequences of a pandemic, so that we aren't, showing up at the podiums and having this conversation broadcast on all the major television networks. But it's a start. It's great.
When did that happen? That's pretty cool.
Oh, it started several months ago, and it's been sort of trickling out.
Is that on YouTube?
In various, no, it's all on the blog.
Your conversations with Noam Chomsky.
Yes, on
Okay.
Nature Bites Last. And
wow.
And one of them is posted within the last week or so. So it's up near the top of the page, and there are links to the other ones as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope more of that can happen with others as well. That'd be great.
That would be awesome. But somebody actually set this up. The American Geophysical Union annual meeting in 2017 was to be held in Seattle, Washington. And there was a panel that was put together, and I was invited to be on the panel. And of course I said yes. I was living in Belize, so I started immediately working on asking supporters to fund me so that I could make that trip. But it was going, and then suddenly I was uninvited, and I couldn't figure out what happened. Turns out Michael Mann was on the panel. He doesn't want to have a conversation with me, because he lies with almost every word that comes out of his mouth. Michael Mann is a distinguished professor at Pennsylvania State University.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
And renowned for his work on climate change. And he didn't want to be appear at the same podium as me for obvious reasons. And I wasn't informed why. I was just kicked off. And then later I found out, oh, Michael Mann is on the panel. No wonder I was booted off.
Yeah.
So I would love to have these conversations, and finally, occasionally, somebody sets something up. Almost always it goes away.
So it's been going good with Noam, though?
Yes.
Good.
Which is awesome.
It's good. Yeah. And, yeah, I wish I could help with that. It's like, I'll be a mediator if you need one.
And, pre-pandemic, I was traveling a lot. In exchange for partial expenses of my travel, and I made it clear at that time that I'd go on the stage with anybody. And there's this guy in California who said he would. He's the world's largest. His name is Watts, and his website is What's Up With That. Watts, WATTS, and he agreed to have a debate. It's all set up, time and place. We're ready to go. I'm there. He doesn't show. That makes for a rather one-sided debate.
Maybe it's that those accusations that maybe they're afraid they'll be associated with it or something.
No, this was way before the
defamation
got underway.
Okay. Yeah. Who knows then? But, I don't know why. Yeah. People would be afraid to just talk about ideas and facts. But
facts are troubling to a lot of people, as I'm sure you are aware.
Yeah. I should. Is it okay if I show people the cover of that book I recommended you?
Yes.
I think it's like such an awesome book. It's called "The Lies We Tell Ourselves: How to Face the Truth, Accept Yourself, and Create a Better Life" by John Frederickson, MSW.
And if you, I know you did this already, but if you resend me the link, I will put it in the description of the YouTube video.
Mm-hmm.
So right below the video, there's this description, and I will put there the link to that book.
Great. Yeah, it's probably one of the most enlightening books I've read in a long time. Like people, it's like just very common for us to lie to ourselves about a number of things. So for like us to ignore evidence and facts and lie to ourselves about the planet is fits right in with our nature, I guess.
Right. That's the most comfortable approach.
Yeah.
And I would argue that most or all lies start by lying to ourselves.
Yeah. Well, and the sad thing is, I think in our society, we use that as a defense because we don't have the proper connection and nurturing that we need in our childhood development, right? So we come up with ways to survive, and a lot of that is deception and lies. So it's a pattern that we keep using.
Yes. I produced a video within the last year or so called The Cost of Lies, trying to tap into that information, that it's actually expensive. Not only as individuals from one person to another, but also at the level of society. You know, people are not talking about very important things. We are being led to believe certain bits of information about what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, for example, about what's going on with respect to climate change, about the importance of football in American life, about all these things that have been influenced, we'll say, by other people.
Mm-hmm. I guess I would just want to add to that, like being that I've read that book and I've been thinking a lot about it. So like reality and truth is like, that's what's like happening right now today, right? Like there are 50 C temps in India. That's true. That's happening right now. I mean, there's other things that are happening right now that you would be more aware of than me, right? I mean, it's totally true that the ocean contains far less fish than it did 100 years ago. That's true today, right? And I mean,
the coral reefs are dying at an incredibly accelerating rate, and
that's true today. Yeah.
And there are huge rainstorms above and in the vicinity of Wuhan, China, as a result of the loss of aerosol masking. So that heated that up then and is causing tremendous rainstorms, big floods a year later.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's some of these things we can put together with great certainty.
Yeah. I mean, I guess just like in psychology, like we can kind of say, like, we know what healthy brain development looks like and what it doesn't. And when you're creating trauma and wounds, like we can say that that's truth, right?
Right.
And we can say it confidently, not like we're just guessing. Like it's
and truth. Then when it comes to projections, like the earlier linear one I talked about, or predictions, we don't know until after it happened.
Yeah.
You can be very confident about a prediction because that's the pattern things have followed for the last 200,047 years. And then it might not happen.
It's not truth till it happens, right? I guess.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, it's good to say that. Good to say that. So yeah, was someone else going to join us today, or did you say, or
no?
Oh, I thought someone was going to join the conversation. You said no?
No, I don't. Well, I might have said that Pauline was going to record it, as she has been.
Someone from the person from the Mirror project that you were working.
Oh, she's coming to visit. In fact, she's in this house right now. We're having a little barbecue party.
Okay.
But I'm not going to drag those folks into this conversation.
Okay. Yeah. See, I misunderstand things all the time.
Pauline is telling me that they've been here for an hour and I need to get off of this line.
Right.
So thank you. I very much appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
Yeah, it was really nice to reconnect.
Yeah.
I hope we can Do it again sometime.
Yes, that would be great. Because again, I think you're an important source of information and perspective for the people who follow my work.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to contribute.
That's great. Okay, I'm going to click us off now.
All right.
Thank-
Have a good day, man.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
You
See you
too.
later.